Hi everyone, it's Rena. So this video is if your sun is in Pisces and you have Capricorn rising. This combination is double feminine energy, which has nothing to do with your particular gender, but has to do with the way that the energy is expressed, which means that it's going to be more internalized or reserved for people close to you, and it's more passive. Although I will say that Capricorn is a cardinal sign, and it certainly can take action. You know, the cardinal signs are really good about that, but there still can be this introversion that takes place. As a matter of fact, this combination can definitely produce somebody who is rather shy. And look to the moon sign to see if this bears itself out. Because if you have like a fire or an air moon sign, which that's masculine energy and more extroverted, sometimes that will kind of overpower things. And also, like with the sun in Pisces, you might have inner planets like Mars in Aries, and that can certainly make a person much more boisterous compared to kind of being, I don't know about timid, but more reserved. Whenever you have an ascendant or a rising sign that is Capricorn, the person is going to be a bit reserved. They maybe take charge in some cases. The rising sign can be how you present yourself to others or how you behave around other people. And you may have this kind of professionalism. People may see you as somebody who is mature, serious. What other words would I use to describe Capricorn rising? Capable. And yet, you might not draw attention. You might actually try to keep from drawing attention. So I'm going to start first by talking about the ascendant and how that may play out for you as a Pisces sun sign. The ascendant determines the ruler, which in this case would be Saturn. So somebody with Capricorn rising may, in some cases, come from a background that is economically depressed, or what you would call maybe like lower income or working class, something where the person may feel this urge to kind of like better themselves. Capricorn is that mountain goat that is constantly kind of, I was going to say clawing their way upwards, but you know, I don't think mountain goats claw, but they just are constantly climbing. And that really represents the Capricorn, not only the work ethic, but the idea of, you know, climbing the ladder of success and bettering oneself. Sometimes this can indicate that the person comes from a family that has established itself. So it doesn't have to be that the person comes from any kind of economic lack. It can actually be the exact opposite, where their family is respected in the community and there's a status there. But in those cases, there might be a situation where the child is still kind of like not feeling that warmth. Saturn can be very cold. and can be very, austere and strict. I think, austerity can also be described as being strict. I'm not quite sure, but that sense of authoritarianism. Saturn rules the 10th house of career and authority figures. The father is connected with Saturn, so maybe the father has a prominence in the community and the rest of the family lives in the shadow of that father. But in any case, your family may be something that you feel the need to live up to. Maybe there's pressure in some cases. One of the things that is actually a plus when somebody grows up without that kind of guidance, because sometimes Saturn, if somebody has the planet Saturn in the first house, or in this case, Capricorn is the ascendant, in some cases, they may have to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. They may have to kind of be their own parent. They might have to parent themselves because they don't have that person doing it for them. But in those cases, sometimes that can be a blessing in disguise because it can lead the person to have more freedom to go after what they want because they don't have somebody trying to, they don't have a parent trying to kind of like pressure them to become like that parent. Sometimes when someone has a family that is high achieving and is very demanding of that child to kind of follow in their footsteps, there can be this sense of not having that freedom to kind of be who you want to be. So, that's why it is so important to kind of see the silver lining and not to be, they have that thing, toxic positivity. I don't think there is such a thing as toxic positivity. But I do think that there is spiritual and psychological bypassing by people trying to kind of gloss over issues. I'm not saying to do that, but to look at what may actually be something that was a saving grace that allowed you to explore on your own if you didn't have that kind of guidance. But some people have it maybe in an excessive amount. This can, I really feel this is one example. If you have an air sign or a fire sign, sun sign, which I would associate with being more like progressive, you may start out more conservative and then get more progressive as you get older. I'm not really talking specifically about political affiliation, although that can sometimes figure into things, because really a person can be conservative on certain issues and more liberal on other issues. That's why I like the word progressive, because it means that the person has an open mind about things in society and the need for reformation or change, and not just staying with what we have all the time. People who favor traditional approaches think that everything, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, but they don't realize that it is broken. And this can run the gamut. So anyway, you may give off a vibe of being more of a traditionalist, at least earlier on in your life. And then maybe this is true of all people that have that Capricorn influence in one way or another, is that as they get older, they may get younger. And that could even be, actual physical appearance. And with Saturn as your ruler, this can be very much the case, because your ascendant can determine how you look. in terms of how somebody with Capricorn rising might look, or dress, one thing is the high cheekbones. And I noticed that David Bowie had very high cheekbones. He was a Capricorn sun. I think his rising sign might have been Sagittarius, no, Aquarius, I think, which I thought was perfect because he always seemed like part alien to me. But the other, thing also with somebody like David Bowie is maybe not when he first started out, but he wore a lot of suits. And, that would be more of a Capricornian thing. No, come to think about it, even in the earlier part of the 70s, I think he was wearing suits. He might have had red, dyed hair, but he was wearing suits. And, so he was a sun in Capricorn. And I think some of these influences can be interchangeable to some degree, but I'm pointing out that traditional kind of attitude of a Capricorn. And this can be reflected in your dress style. You may favor more professional looking clothing, even on your off hours. You may be more dressed up than the average person, and you may not like casual clothing all that much, to kind of bum around in, if you will. I know people, I don't know what the sign is. I know somebody who just wears button-down shirts all the time and doesn't seem to ever wear like t-shirts and things like that. And there are people who they always want to dress up. They think it's sloppy to wear jeans and t-shirts or whatever, or jogging pants. One of the things with this combination that I could see is to really pay attention to is, do you tend to be overly serious? Again, this can be something as you get older that you loosen up and you don't have the same attitude. By the way, what I heard described with this phenomenon of Capricorn getting younger is that because Capricorn is so ambitious, it wants to achieve all these things, and once it achieves them, it feels like it can relax, and then just they can let their hair down and not be as uptight about things, maybe not work as hard too. Now, obviously, we're talking about the rising sign. I've said before that I think that the rising sign is in play in a big way until the person's 30 years old. I actually read that, and I didn't read why, and I just made the assumption that it had something to do with the first Saturn return. And I'm not just talking about having Saturn as a ruler, I'm talking about everyone's ascendant. And the reason that this would be the case is that the influence from the family of origin would be more in play until your first Saturn return when you feel like you are really an adult. And part of feeling like an adult is feeling independent. Even when you're in your 20s, if you are going to college and getting money from your parents and things like that, or living at home and living under the same roof with your parents, which a lot more 20-somethings seem to be doing these days, it's hard to feel like a full adult because you're not self-supporting, things like that. So by the age of 30, there can be that really freeing oneself, and then it allows your sun sign to be more what you gravitate towards, and you will see it in terms of the types of choices that you make. And it can run the gamut. It can even be the type of person that you're attracted to, or who is attracted to you, because if you are kind of showing more of your rising sign, you may attract a certain type of individual. In this case, because Capricorn and Pisces are both feminine signs, I think that the person will tend to attract earth and or water signs more than fire or air, and therefore they will be in that compatible range because you have this sextile between the sun and the rising sign. Now that's officially dependent on the degrees between your sun and rising sign, but I'm pointing out that it is a harmonious angle because also the elements that are involved really do point to that, and the bottom line is that there will be an alignment in terms of how you want to, the kind of goals that you have and how you present yourself. And I think sometimes people might underestimate the importance of that. I think it's a lot more helpful than people may realize, because when there is a clash between your sun and your rising sign, I'll give myself as an example. I have the sun in Sagittarius and I have Taurus rising, and they're also, those placements are close enough to be in conjunction. This isn't necessarily true as much these days because my rising sign is not really as influential, I feel. But back in the day when I was in my 20s, for instance, it was very disjointed how I presented myself and who I really was in this lifetime, or who I aspired to become. And one of the big ways that this plays out is people not getting you. So that can be very frustrating when you don't really put two and two together about why that is happening. And it can be as superficial as how you dress and how you really are, and people just making assumptions based on outer reasons. But in this case, this is harmonious, so that can be good for people seeing that consistency. Pisces as a sign is a sign that I feel is touched by trauma very deeply, and may even experience it more often. And trauma, I don't mean like just like having a parent die when you're young, although I think all water signs can definitely experience this, and I think that usually it will be the father, but not, obviously 100% of those cases. But I'm not even talking about that. I'm just talking about any kind of, dysfunctional behavior that has a very personal meaning to you. So getting abused, being singled out. I think that's a theme for Pisces, being scapegoated or being bullied within the family of origin. Again, because of that sextile or potential sextile between the sun and ascendant, it may not have been too bad for some of you, but still, Pisces is a mutable water sign, so Pisces people tend to be very sensitive and very impressionable, meaning that they can really be influenced by their environment. Water itself has been shown to be influenced by the environment that it's in, and that leads to the person whose sun is in Pisces being vulnerable to outer influences. Also being an empath, a natural empath, that can take place. Now, I will say that with this combination, I feel this sense of rigidity with the sign of Capricorn, maybe because of the Saturn rulership, that there's like a tendency, it's not so much stubbornness as it is, it's like calcification. Saturn is connected to the bones, the skeletal system, and sometimes there is calcification within a person where they feel like they can't move, they feel stuck energy. And in terms of how that person might present themselves, they might be this immovable object. And that, to me, I always say that the rising sign is like a defense mechanism or survival instincts from the family that the person comes from. And with Capricorn, if the the child had to fend for themselves, then they're going to be very self-protective, but in a way that is not necessarily so feeling. It's like, Fort Knox or something. And there can also be this coldness that the person gives towards others, because Pisces can be very sympathetic and very, very caring. But with that rising sign, it might be something that the person's cold. If you have inner planets in Aquarius, Mercury in Aquarius, Venus in Aquarius, or Mars in Aquarius, your moon can be in any sign, including Aquarius or other air signs or something like that, then maybe earth signs that are very dry, then you might be less like the typical Pisces person and more emotional, like Pisces normally is. And if you are more on the dry side, and if you ever get called out by anyone, for being rather cold, you would probably take it to heart. You would probably not like that. Some people might wear it as a badge of honor and not care, but I think that Sun and Pisces people would care. Pisces is very compassionate, sometimes self-sacrificing to the extreme. I do feel, though, that you may be proud that you have a backbone, that you're able to say no, because a lot of Pisces do struggle with saying no, having boundaries, because Pisces is ruled by Neptune, and there can be this, kind of collapsing mechanism with Neptune. It's really not collapse, it's like dissolving. That's what Neptune is, like fog. It can kind of cover things, make things indistinct. Saturn is very disciplined, organized, and structured. So these two, you can look at your sun's ruler as your ruler as well. So on some level, Neptune is your ruler too. So maybe you go back and forth, where sometimes you have a rigidity and you're kind of like, you use rules as an excuse for sticking to something or pushing something. And then at other times, maybe when your sympathies are aroused, then you are more kind of like that mutable water where anything goes, where you just are going to open your heart indiscriminately. And that's another interesting thing, talking about your attitude towards love, because a rising sign may be kind of like what you have experienced in the past. And if you were kind of self-reliant growing up and had to do things yourself, you may have trust issues, especially with Pisces as a sun sign, that you just kind of experienced in the past, and you are very self-sufficient. Usually Pisces, or I shouldn't say usually, but Pisces as a sign can be dependent or passive, and these are not necessarily bad things. Well, being dependent isn't the best thing, because obviously then a person may give away their power. I don't really mean the word dependent, but more passive, which means that you may be more open to other people helping, and that's kind of how the sign of Pisces is. But because of the Capricorn influence, the person may be a lot more resourceful and therefore not needing that kind of a help, and maybe more, I wouldn't say proud, but just kind of wanting to do it yourself. And so with this combination, in terms of love, the person may not, first of all, be kind of introverted, and that can kind of impede, when you meet someone, really kind of opening up and stuff like that. But if you trust that that person is going to be a good person, I feel like this is a family-oriented combination, and that you may, I do feel that you probably would take love seriously. You do have to look at other factors like the moon sign and the Venus sign to get a feel for, how your attitude towards love and relationships and things like that, because that could definitely be different from Pisces person to Pisces person. But I do think this combination would be more traditional, wanting a relationship so that you can build a life together with someone. That structure, again, coming up, I never think that the rising sign is totally going to be, not influencing a person to some degree. But it just is not necessarily center stage later on in life, but it still could be influencing it. And you may be the kind of person in love who, when you're younger, is looking for a person who is going to guide you in some cases, and that makes you, in other cases, sometimes there might be the tendency is the exact opposite, where you are the one who wants to help another person, but the problem is you don't want to get dragged down with their problems if they are someone who just keeps getting into problems. Because this is definitely something that Pisces people tend to have issues with, and that can obviously affect your life in an adverse way. In terms of the type of profession, I wouldn't necessarily look at the rising sign, but it could be that from a young age you worked or wanted to work. And with Pisces, the type of professions that I typically think of are associated with like the healthcare field, especially like a nurse, somebody who's nurturing others. You may go into spiritual types of healing modalities later on if you really explore these things seriously, and then that might change the kind of work. So it might be a spiritual type of profession. But because Capricorn is your rising sign, you may feel pressured to have a quote-unquote real job. I'm laughing because, I was just reading yesterday I got sent something in the mail. I mean, in my email, somebody that was promoting a program, and they were talking about authenticity and how, if people say to YouTubers, get a real job, YouTube isn't a real job and stuff like that. And then people doubt themselves who are content creators. I was laughing because that could be a dilemma that somebody like you might face if you actually were a YouTuber, that you would be concerned with how it comes across to other people because of that traditional streak within yourself. And these are the kind of things that I think as we get older that we tend to become more mature about. Because when you decide to know yourself, I think Pisces as a sign tends to have issues with knowing themselves because of that influence from Neptune. And you might be tempted to define yourself by the thing that you're currently doing. So you have to really, realize that that is not necessarily who you came here to be. That might just be something that you're doing because you are good at it or you have an interest in it, but long term, it may evolve into something else. But in terms of, that typical Piscean emotional tendency and sometimes the self-destructive path that Pisces people can go on when they are, I feel, either reacting to past trauma or dealing with, feeling like a victim, which, that can come from past trauma, but feeling like they can't change their life for some reason. I don't feel that this combination is really at risk of at risk of that as much as another sign might be. Because when you have Capricorn rising, I think you have an ace in the hole. Is that what the saying goes? You have something in your corner that's going to make you naturally more organized, disciplined, ambitious, take charge kind of person. So that lessens the chances of you kind of succumbing to self-doubt and being, what we would call chaotic and all of that. So you may have more of a direction that you can see yourself going in. Okay, that's what I have for you. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.